Well, with that, I will call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. We have no public comments, so we'll move right into business items. The purchasing
Great.
agenda, please.
Good afternoon.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, Ms. Shotke and Dr. Flores and Dr. Baker. Glad you can make it. Help us out here. Purchasing agenda, remarkably pretty sparse this month. Nothing in the building and site project funds. The only thing maybe out of the ordinary is if you look at item 1B3, $170,000 for 2 box trucks. We have 2 box moving type trucks. As you know, we're transporting a lot of furniture between buildings and technology equipment. Both those vehicles are 20 years old. One of them is not operational. It's just not cost effective to fix it at this point in time. So we are going to, these are actually bids we've already gotten, and we're going to purchase 2 26-foot box trucks to replace these 2 that are just past their time. And I suspect these will last, the new ones will last 20 years too. So that's something out of the ordinary. Everything else on there are annual type of renewals, the Cherry Health Services, of course, and advertising and Aon, the $25,000 required by a public act to every 3 years actually bid out our health insurance, and we have to post that on our transparencies. This is the 3rd year, so that $25,000 is the cost of Aon going through that process for us and to get bids, and that'll be posted. The new bids will be posted on our transparency reporting by December 1st, right? Rhonda's a date for updating the transparency information? Different person might have different duties. Okay. It'll be soon on that transparency reporting, so. Yes.
Question, I have a wondering on the process, as you indicate that you took bids, so we're dealing with lowest bidder, right? Through the process, 3 bids or? For
trucks?
For trucks, and was it the same applied to the marketing contract? Marketing for district items?
Well, we've actually worked with Judy Tompkins for a number of years. It's just a renewal of the contract.
And Judy Tompkins?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't do bidding in that respect?
Not this case, no. Again, the requirement is services are not required to bid formally. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Do we have an idea of what costs actually are associated with the purchase of radio time and television time and what we're getting for that? I mean, is that something that we should be more aware of as a finance committee and the board? And then what portion of that is for the contracted time?
I'm actually confused about what specifically you're asking about.
Well, I was-
I thought
Well,
no.
Aon, that's not what you're talking about.
My wondering is our
Communication.
bid process and whether or not we're applying those same procedures to all contracts.
The answer is we are required, both by board policies as well as state of Michigan policies, to bid all, depending on dollar amount. There's new procurement policies in place now, but basically anything over this $24,000 state mandated required to bid for any product purchases or construction programs. We are not required to bid for any kind of services, such as advertising services, accounting services, insurance services. I will tell you that best practices will say in many of those cases you should bid, and we do bid. We have every few years, but actually as accounting services as an example, the ISD bundles it for all districts that want to participate in it. So we go through that about every 3 years. Aon, well, we hired them about a year after I came on board through a bid process also, and that was a change. You may recall a couple years ago now we bid out our banking services. We went from Fifth Third to PNC. So I believe, Dr. Flores, at one time we had bid out these services through Judy Tompkins, and because she's done a great job and knows the district so well that we just essentially renew a contract. But the breakdown of how that's spent communications, Helmholtz, John has that. I don't know off the top of my
I
head.
understand.
Yeah.
I said, my first wondering is are we being consistent with the process of bidding? I think there's a lot of advertising agencies in the community that would certainly, raise a question or concern
Sure.
if that were brought to their attention publicly. And I think it's only fair in a process that we engage in, that we look to all available sources. We just recently bid out, services for the community engagement process with our superintendent
Right.
search. And there is a services contract, but, we're doing it on a bid basis. And, my familiarity with this field in communications is that many agencies will in fact bid on services, providing services. And so,
Sure.
in a competitive market, we ought to be, making sure that we're consistent.
And again, generally we do, but the frequency, it all depends. Again, when you talk about services, typically it's good practice, best practices, every major service providers, every 3 to 5 years, you go back to the market and bid it out again to see, to your point, to make sure you're being competitive. I don't know when this was last bid out, to be honest with you, Dr.
I'm
Flores,
concerned
but
about transparency and the appearance.
I understand.
Okay.
So in terms of, because I do think it's important to have bidding process, I think it's also good to understand, obviously, we're not gonna rebid every year for something that we use, but you're saying that for some services that are ongoing, we do rebid every 3 to 5 years.
And there's some.
For the trucks,
Yeah.
obviously, we're
right,
bidding, we're
right,
looking
right.
for the best deal for
Right.
the trucks.
Yep,
Um,
yep.
For, in this particular case, advertising, I think that, if you wanted more information about that process that you don't have, we could, certainly discover that.
Yeah,
My-
I mean, John, like I said, John has obviously
My-
other things, and I understand your point about, yeah.
Yeah, mine's is advocacy for transparency and a consistent process across the board, systemic thinking.
So I think that also, so in this case, so we should presume that these processes are taking place, right? So that, but we don't necessarily know that you're gonna know the process that took place for every single purchase or buying of services.
Correct.
So I think that really what we need is a process of how do we learn that on a consistent basis,
Well, we as a board, and it begins with the finance committee, review contracts that are presented to us, and we raise the questions about policy and whether or not we're following policy. Secondly, whether or not we're being transparent in our actions and fair in terms of providing a process that is open and is inclusive. And that's where the advocacy comes from. Okay, from that realm, from that understanding of the field, that there are companies in our community, in our business community, that probably, had they been requested to do so, may have submitted bids to provide those services to our district.
Well, but at this point, what I'm suggesting is that we don't know.
I understand that.
Right.
So we can't, so I mean, I think that we're being asked to approve the purchase. I think it's appropriate for us to ask, what is our process? What is our policy? Are our policies being followed? But I think that to some extent, we have to presume that those policies and procedures aren't. I do agree with you in terms of asking questions.
Good.
It's just, when do we ask it and why do we do it? I mean,
I think.
because most purchasing agendas have 20 or 30 items on there.
Right.
We're not going to ask what was the process for each item. But I'm just suggesting at this point, we don't know. There's nobody in the room that knows how the advertising services were chosen.
Correct.
But except we should presume that policies were followed.
Correct, and you can presume that
But I'm not
all
suggesting
things
that
are
we should-
followed well and so forth.
I'm not suggesting
My
that we do
wonderings,
it blindly,
my
but-
wonderings are based on this recurring process and contract, and whether or not we're following a fair and open process. And again, my concerns are transparency and perception.
So, Mr. Oberst, perhaps then, at the December Finance Committee meeting, could we review the policy, the purchasing policy?
We can.
Just get an update on
We
the
can.
language there. If services are not mentioned, perhaps we can make a recommendation to the policy committee if we feel like that needs to be included on a 3 to 5 year basis for rebid. But I think that will help us all find some clarity because we are indeed speculating about what exactly the policy is. So why don't we look at that?
But
in
I
December?
think that this committee is part of it, so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably why we're meeting today instead of not meeting, because when I'm here as a board member, not as a committee member, I'm assuming
Right.
I can support a purchasing agenda because that has been vetted by
Through
the finance committee.
Exactly,
And
yes,
so this is part of that
Right,
process,
right.
and then
Correct.
part of the finance committee's job is to say, are we following
right.
our
Sure.
policies? It's just, how do we, so actually, what is the system that allows us to do that efficiently and understand that this is occurring?
Yeah.
I also think asking that question reminds people, especially when we're not required by law, to find out if there's other options,
Right.
and are we, because this is a board that requires and believes in, transparency
Clearly.
and opening up and being inclusive with the people that we
Our
hire.
vendors, absolutely.
Thank you.
Good.
I think we're saying the same thing, Tony.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. All right, any other questions specific to the purchasing agenda? Excellent. May I have a motion, please, to move it forward to the full board?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, move that one
Great.
forward.
The other action item relates to the Pine Street property. You may recall, started back a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, and we initially had an option for the purchase of the property that we extended, I believe it was in February of this year, until maybe June 30th, and then actually signed a purchase contract with the land bank. Kent County Land Bank actually is an acquirer of the property. That happened in July. Dwelling Place is a developer of the LTAC affordable housing units there. And as you know, there's a process in terms of getting the LTAC financing approved, and then there's various other aspects that have to take place before they ultimately can begin construction. One of the things they needed was a commitment of some sort on the property, which is why that was important. So they weren't sure how long the process would take. We wanted a purchase agreement in place, so what we did when we had the purchase agreement in July, had it signed, was had a closing date extended out to no later than October 31st. Dwelling Place contacted us, I think, a week and a half ago. One of the requirements is the city and MISTA have to produce a joint publication for a public comment period, which is required. And the public comment period goes for 30 days. That particular document has yet to be published. So they asked for an extension on the closing date until the end of the calendar year, December 31st. So this will not, the deal's still in place. In fact, I think a couple of weeks ago, they had a construction site up, right? Ken, we asked them to take down because we hadn't closed on it yet. So it's just a matter of some additional governmental red tape, if you will, they have to get through. Obviously, we talked to the superintendent. She was fine with extending it. And so what you have in front of you is the amendment of that purchase agreement, just extending the closing date, and everything else in the purchase agreement remains the same. And that's all we're waiting on, is for them to finish up going through this 30-day public notice process. So
So in that 30-day, I'm sorry.
Please, no, yeah, go right
In
ahead.
that 30-day public process, is there a chance that they will learn from the public that
I suppose there's always a chance, but is a probability high that something would queer the deal? No, no.
Right, so, but if that happens, we would have some chance to respond to.
And there's already been public meetings on
Yeah,
the
that's right.
proposed project back
Yeah,
when
exactly.
this all started.
So there's no,
There was some neighborhood concern, but all that's been dealt with in some of the modifications to the development.
Other questions? All right, may I have a motion, please, to move forward this amendment to the purchase agreement to the full board?
So moved.
support.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Reports.
Reports, the September financial dashboard is within your packet there. Again, really the first full month of our school year, and as I mentioned last month, these early months, we get our property tax payments up front. We don't incur significant amount of expenses until school gets into the further into the year, as you will. So as you can see there on the dashboard report, no state aid payments yet. Our first state aid payment just came, right? It just came, so you'll see that for next month in October. But as far as the expenses, there's, at this point they're tracking, but there's not a month and a half of school doesn't really do much. I did make a change, however. If you look at the middle column down there, the projected fund balance, our audit has essentially been complete. We haven't finalized it. The numbers aren't going to change that much. We actually picked up some fund balance for last fiscal year, and so I've adjusted the projected general fund balance for what we picked up in fiscal year 18, which got our percent. It was at, I believe, 5.7% up to this 8.49%, based on the audited 2018 financial statements. And obviously, as we have amendments to the current year budget, we'll update that. I believe we're looking to have the work session on the audit before the board meeting on November 5th, so we'll go over all that, and we'll also have a usual spreadsheet of fund balance information for you at that point in time. So that's a positive from that perspective.
Yeah, great.
So as you can see, bond-related expenditures, again, that middle column, we've spent since over $54 million of our bond dollars. I did meet, with respect to the bond, I did meet with bond counsel 2 weeks ago. Likely we'll bring to this body a resolution next month, or the first meeting, I think there's only one meeting in December, the board, to issue that second tranche of bonds. We have another meeting with our financial advisor and bond counsel, I believe, this Friday, and talk a little bit about timing and impact on the millage with property values going up. I think our initial projections are going to be a little bit better, so we can get that other second tranche of bonds, although the interest rates are going to be up a little bit from where they were 2 years ago. But we'll still be looking at spring to early summer certainly before June 1st, we'll be looking to issue that second tranche of bonds. So just to put you on notice for that.
Great.
Any questions on, and again, all the details supporting that information sits behind that dashboard report.
Well, you make this spending of millions of dollars sound really mundane.
Right.
It's not the way people are asking about it in the neighborhoods.
Well, I know.
When are we getting our building fixed?
You got to see it, obviously. It's more exciting to see the work done. So.
And that is also, your comment about what people ask.
Yeah.
I'm asked often as I'm out campaigning, what are we spending in percentage-wise administratively versus instructional? What's the percentage difference there? And I was trying to go through those numbers on the dashboard, looking at administrative salaries and then other administration, and then comparing that to instructional. And of course, I may not be accurate, but it was if I didn't include the other administration, it was at 23%, and then if I included other administration, it come out to like 28%. I don't know that that's
It's not
accurate.
that high. No.
Wondering,
Yeah.
and I know that I have asked in the past that we look at comparative data surrounding districts and districts within the state that are comparable to ours to see what that ratio of administrative costs versus instructional costs.
Yeah, we have the ability to look at that in comparison, and I've done some, not only with those costs, but a lot of other costs, and based on it's many times easy to make a comparison on a per student basis as opposed to just numbers per se. And we are very favorable in a lot of cases for that. Perhaps when we have the audit on the 5th, we can talk a little about that. Our audit partner will be there with some graphs with some comparisons too, so.
Thank you. And I know, as I've said in the past, that this does require additional work on your part, and I certainly apologize for that. But at the
No.
same time, looking at data, being a data-driven organization, and able to make decisions based on that. And I am truly impressed with the final report that you give on facilities, and you did do some of that analysis in terms of the management or the facility staff.
Yeah.
And so I think that, perhaps with the new software that you have acquired and
Yeah,
capabilities, it certainly would be
again,
a
one of the challenges you
request
have
worth
is administration is defined differently in different districts, and while we have a standard chart of accounts that all school districts use, that doesn't always define what we may think of as administration or some other type of cost too. So we try to make some general comparisons, but we find this out as we meet it as a group of finance managers every month, that sometimes things are looked at a little bit different, are grouped differently depending on the school district, than, again, based on the informational needs of the individual school districts too. So,
And I understand
yeah.
that too. We had the same situation with the dropout definition
Yeah.
years ago.
yeah,
So
okay.
at some point, we'll come together and call an orange and orange, compare the two.
Good.
So you can add that to the.
Well, yeah, we can talk
to
about the
audit.
5th.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
Warm, safe, and dry.
Warm, safe, and dry. We've really not done much with that, saving it for emergencies. We did apply some of that funding to the turfed soccer field at Chavez. We needed to deal with it, and it did fit the criteria, so that's in process. Bond. Currently, we have the security improvements going on at 5 buildings. When those are completed, and Mr. Johnson and I will sit down and look at another group of buildings to deal with secure entries. It's taken longer than we expected with this, but we want to make sure we do it right.
Yeah.
We have the air conditioning project still remaining at 4 elementary buildings. That'll be done around spring break time, certainly in time for when we need air conditioning in the spring. We continue with design at Southwest, Union, and Ottawa. We expect the Union project to go out to bid next May. We're still working on the phasing for that. Since that's our most crowded high school, that's going to be the most difficult to phase through.
The Union's the next high school.
Not the next one,
Okay.
but that will go out in May.
Yeah.
And I don't have my date in front of me. It'll be about 2021 before that's completed, maybe 22. In January, we expect to bid Southwest High School and Ottawa. Those will both be completed for start of school in August of 2020. The one thing about Ottawa is right now we put out an early bid package for long lead time equipment. Some of that equipment is 16 to 20 weeks, and we need to get that here. We expect that equipment to total about $1.5 million. And what we're requesting is that we be able to take that as a purchase action directly to the board meeting on November 19th. So that'll save us 2 to 3 weeks in getting it here.
Yeah, fine.
Otherwise, the city project is moving along. We're still on track to be done about the end of the school year. Every once in a while we get a call. We've got some punch list to finish up still at Buchanan, which is normal.
Absolutely.
And then once the next group of bonds are sold, we'll sit down and go through the phase 2 and determine a updated schedule for those.
Central will be in that one.
Yes. And then Central will be done, Central and the Fountain Montessori building will be done together. They need to be treated as a campus.
Yeah, I might add, Ken mentioned about bringing stuff to the board on the 19th. It's likely that same board meeting will need to bring a purchase agreement for the Southwest Community High land from the Plaza Roosevelt development. We're working on the purchase document right now. We need that land acquired in order to really put the bids out, so we do that. So we are working on that right now. Like, we'll have to bring it to the board on that date so we can get it approved prior to the end of the month.
Very good. Other questions about the bond or warm, safe, and dry? Okay, facilities report.
Facilities report, this is for our fiscal year, school year 17-18. So it technically went through June 30th. It includes projects, so it goes back including the reopening of Ridgemore Park, Montessori, the construction on Museum, High School Buchanan, city is underway, university now is complete. And then we've started the air conditioning projects on elementaries and security projects and design work on, as we talked about, Ottawa, Union, and Southwest. There's also a section on maintenance and operations, on what we do there. And our biggest challenge there is hiring tradesmen. We've had significant retirements and are not getting much response to our position postings. We do have backup plans and we're maintaining, but folks to fill those positions are not plentiful. And so we're continuing to look at what we do there. The section on energy, you'll see there's graphs in there showing the energy use and compared to heating days. Probably the most telling is if you go into the Appendix A, where it's directly relates to a building, you can see what is a cost per student to run that building energy-wise. We do it two ways. We compare to what is the actual enrollment in the building and what is the capacity enrollment in the building, just to get a feel for when a building is not full, what that starts to add up to per student. And then there's a section on sustainability, and one of the interesting things is GRPS students have planted over 200 trees in the past year. We've also expanded the composting that goes on. Those are two of the bigger expansive items under sustainability. That's quite a few trees that have gone in.
That's great.
Kristen has worked on grants. They've all been free.
That's great.
And then as you go through it, if we need to respond to anything or clarify, we'll be happy to do that.
I had opportunity to go through it and have some questions. One, it indicates we had 61 buildings, 4,500,000 square feet of floor space on page 4. In, I think it's Appendix A that you have, you show on the graph, you show these, I guess the number of students enrolled, and then what was it, the I guess the square footage occupied. I'd have to open that one. My question is do we have a calculation of how much square footage is currently unused in each building, and then a total for the district?
Not per se. We could identify based on classroom space that's used or unused. Most buildings, if there's unused space, they find a use for it. That's why we've done it per student, because we know exactly how many students it can take at capacity and how many are there. But we'd have to go back. We could revisit based on a square footage, but we haven't done that here.
Yeah, and that would be certainly a recommendation, just looking at it and trying to understand data and knowing that our student population has decreased over the years. and yet we still have a good number of buildings. And then how much space do we have that is not being utilized in each of those buildings? I mean, when you report out that one of the schools, as an example, has 790 students, but yet its capacity is 1,385, as an example, it leaves me thinking, how much space are we talking that's not being used? How many classrooms, how many offices, and how could we best use our space in the future? Is there an opportunity for a consolidation, for moving staff to fill those buildings, to renting out space in the community for programs, whether it be the police department or the health services providers or mental health agencies or Spectrum Health or whoever, Trinity Health, who might be able to access space to serve community and serve students.
Yeah, actually, Dr. Flores, coincidentally, over probably the last 60 days, we've had discussions about that, just looking at building capacity. And you may recall we have some, we've engaged a few months ago this group of Plant Moran to help with the building construction so really they do connection with those services. We're looking at expanding that, not only to help with some enrollment projections, but also just what you're talking about, to look at building capacity, because you're right. We do know we have several buildings that are woefully under capacity and consequently not efficient to operate. And but then you get into all kinds of other considerations. You talk about consolidation, we get that, but at least it gives us a start. So we're actually talking and looking about that, and may likely have a proposal to bring before this body the next 30 or 60 days to do this.
So my recommendation is in the matrix that you provide in the report, that it include square footage in each one of those buildings being analyzed, and then a total aggregate to say how much space do we have overall the district. And then in buildings like this one, that's referenced, because it has 0 students, how much space are we utilizing and how much space is vacant, underutilized?
Right.
Because, I think that, a new superintendent, a new administrative leadership team might look at things differently in terms of delivery models, and I think that certainly data is required in order to analyze where we're at. Another question, if I could, since I have the floor.
Yeah.
In water testing, water is a national issue, and certainly in Michigan, an issue. When you look at Detroit and how many their buildings, school buildings, had high levels of contamination, and then the Flint crisis. And in the report, I see just a small, I don't know, 3-4 line paragraph that says we test our water in the hallways, I think annually or whatever. Do we have, I guess, a thorough plan for testing all of the water sources in our buildings? I know it is laudable, certainly, that we're testing the water and it's on our radar. But, are there results for that? Or, is there a comprehensive plan?
Our plan is to test annually, and we have tested all hallway drinking fountains, being that the most likely place that a student can ingest water. We've communicated with the DEQ. We've reviewed the protocols that are out there. They do not recommend testing every water source. So going into a restroom where you wash hands would not be tested for drinking purposes. So we've stuck to the hallway drinking fountains where you can ingest. We have focused primarily on copper and lead. Those are contaminants that can be introduced at the source within our building systems. Things like PFAS, we have not, because we're on city water, and that comes from the original source. It's not something that, it's either going to come out of the water plant with it or without it. It's not something that can happen in the water system. So we rely on the city's annual report for those kinds of things. What we have done for copper and lead, the protocol actually is that if you find higher levels or levels above the action, the EPA action level, there's several things you can do. One is to flush the system daily. We've not taken that because it just puts too much responsibility on our custodians every morning to make sure they flush it out. What we've done is taking those portals right out of service, either by shutting them off, physically removing them so that they're not a potential contaminant. And to be honest, the most likely place that you can get copper and lead is in a drinking fountain. There's copper pipe, there's lead solder. If it's there, even replacing it with a new one that hasn't built up the coatings yet may not be the answer. So we've just removed them. We test annually. We try and test the same spots and then expand every year. We find others so we have a comparison. But last year we took 2 drinking fountains out of service because they failed. One was for lead and one was for copper. We've also, when requested, tested for bacteria level. That typically is more prevalent when you have a well. We are not on a well system. A district like Rockford that has both municipal water and well water in buildings, there is I believe it's a 3-year reporting cycle that they have to do for wells. So we've just done it on an as-needed basis. It typically happens when the city is working on a water system. They're doing a water main project, a street project. It'll put turbidity in the water. The city's protocol is to flush, but for a lot of parents, that's not enough. And I understand that reassuring enough. So we'll do a bacteria test. We can turn it around in a couple of days. And what we've done is offered then if there's a concern in that building, we'll provide bottled drinking water until that test comes back. So there is no mandate from the state to do testing for water at a school. They keep talking about passing legislation. We've just taken it upon ourselves to do the lead and copper on an annual basis.
Okay, then if there's any other questions related to that, before I go on, last question or last, that's just comment in reacting to the wonderful report that you've provided, the facilities report. And that is that I didn't notice any recommendations section in there, and not to bring fault to the report, but to suggest that might be an opportunity to lead the board in terms of, and the superintendent, the administrative team, in terms of what you feel, the whole facilities area department needs to have, whether that's in the area of testing water or it's in the area of use of buildings or whatever, your priorities are. I mean, my familiarity with that reporting process is that you generally, submit a list of recommendations for the district to put on their radar.
Noted, thank
So
you.
noted.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other comments on the facilities report? Good, Dr. Baker? Yep. Excellent. Well, thank you again. I always find this report to be fascinating and really telling, and a great catalyst for conversation. So thank you, Dr. Flores, as well. All right, looks like nothing under policy. And any other final comments this evening? All right, with that, I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.